Namaste, guys. ChristianRLong, Life Enhancement Consultant, giving you a big and beautiful shout out on this, hold on everyone, Tuesday afternoon here in Denver, Colorado. We're doing the stream a little bit earlier than we usually do. We usually do them in the evenings. I thought, let's do it in the afternoon. Why? Maria, Namaste, because we get a different audience, because people watch this in different time zones around the world. Sometimes people are sleeping, like Ellie. So we're able to get Ellie on here and share some energy back and forth. Pat, Namaste, welcome, welcome, welcome. And so I wanted to talk about harmonizing relationships. How many of us want to have, Eric, the barbecue king of Massachusetts, how many of us want to have, exactly, I am early, how many of us want to have more harmonious relationships? I know I do, and I know most of you who are watching this stream, because the people who log on to these streams care about becoming better people through energy healing, meditation, and practical spirituality. So let's get right into it. So many, many years ago, Grandmaster Choa Koksui, the modern founder of pranic healing and Hatha Yoga, wrote these teeny tiny books called the Golden Lotus Sutra series. You just left work, so it is good timing. And he wrote about 7 of these books. And within each page, if you will, is a sutra or a quote or aphorism that you take, Aspen, Namaste, you meditate on, you penetrate deeply to practice understanding, and hopefully transform your life through the process. So you can do this with any and all holy books, any and all quotes from great spiritual teachers or great minds to transform your life. And so I realized when I went to the recent annual Hatha Yoga retreat in San Diego, California, that I had not had 2 of the 7 books. I was missing them. And I was like, whatever happened to those books? And then I realized they were actually in a storage unit with my ex-girlfriend in Jersey City, New Jersey, with a lot of other spiritual notes and spiritual artifacts from pranic healing and Hatha Yoga. And I realized, aha, these are forever gone. I need to buy 2 additional copies. But these are the updated ones. They got the bright, clean, nice cover and whatever. All the money I make anyways, Reina, Namaste, goes back into pranic healing in most ways, shapes, and forms. So I was flipping through today's book, and this particular version of the Golden Lotus Sutra books is called Beyond the Mind. Beyond the Mind. And so I'm flipping through, talking about meditation, talking about the Twin Hearts meditation, talking about our Hatha Yoga. And I was like, this is an interesting topic, that I realized that we can use this sutra to understand our spiritual lives better and to have more harmony with the people in our lives. So the sutra is very simple. What is important is to understand, not to agree or disagree. What is important is to understand, not to agree or to disagree. Because how many people in our lives, they will make a statement about something, a statement about politics, a statement about religion, a statement about upbringing. Adriana, Namaste. Some statement they will make about some position they have in life, and our automatic knee-jerk response, or I should say knee-jerk reaction, is to agree with them or to disagree with them. But that is based more on the emotional plane and how we feel versus on the higher plane of our rational cognitive ability. So when it says it's more important to understand, understanding is connected to the Ajna chakra. This is the CEO of the energy body. This is the Washington, D.C. For those of you in the United States, Washington, D.C. is the law-abiding place of the United States. It's where the laws are made. It's where our political leaders are. It's basically the guiding, Sarah, Namaste, the guiding energy of our country. So the Washington, D.C. of our energy body is the Ajna chakra. It's the big boss. It controls and regulates the prana of the chakras below it. So when this is in charge, everything else is in order. When this is not so in charge, we kind of live lives of chaos. So when we are understanding something, we are removing our emotionality from it, and we are perceiving that thing from the mental plane. And this, the Ajna chakra, this chakra is connected to the higher soul. So when we understand something, we remove negative emotions connected to it. And we're looking at it as objectively as we possibly can. Not to agree or disagree with the person's position, but to understand where that person is coming from in their position. Does that make sense? Sylvia, namaste. So if you look at somebody and they make a statement, a political statement, a religious statement, an economic statement, a statement about family values, instead of going, I agree with you or I disagree with you, understand where that person is coming from with their viewpoint. And through understanding, you have a tremendous amount of compassion for their viewpoint. Not only in the process of understanding them, Susan, namaste, you understand yourself better, which is profound because that's transformative. The Vietnamese Buddhist monk Thich Nhat Hanh said, understanding is love and love is understanding. So when you sit down and you try to understand why that person thinks, speaks, and does what they do, you have a greater level of love for them. And when you love somebody, you can nurture them, you can provide for them, you can care for them, and you can, and then you also do not cause them injury. Versus, I agree with you, so I'm on board with you. I disagree with you, so I'm going to be an adamant adversary to where you're coming from. So I realize how many of us have relationships with people where it's about proving the other person wrong and then proving ourselves right? And I held that position for many, many years. I wanted, because of my low self-esteem, low self-worth, low self-image at that time in my life, the best way to prove that I'm a good person was to make the other person wrong and to prove that I was right. It was like this combative energy back and forth. Ellie says, nice contrast between understanding and agreeing. Completely. And we'll get to a little bit of the fine-tuning of the understanding and the harmonizing aspect. So it was about making the other person wrong and making myself right. And this reminds me of a great teaching from a clinical psychologist, Dr. Jordan Peterson, out of the University of Toronto, where he says, most of us are in relationships, especially intimate relationships, we're sitting on opposite sides of the table, right? You're here and your partner's here and you're combating one another. He says, and this would be the practice of understanding, he says, rather than you sitting on the other side of the table and trying to invalidate their viewpoint and get your viewpoint validated, sit on the same side of the table and do your very best to help that person make their case. Cool, right? So you have one viewpoint, the other person has the other viewpoint, and they're not making a good case to convince you. So your job is to sit on the same side of the table and help them to express their viewpoint to you as clearly, as succinctly as possible. So you can go, I never thought about it like that. Now I understand why you think the way you think, why you speak the way that you speak, and why you act the way that you act. Before, it was about proving you wrong and proving myself right. How amazing of a shift is that for the relationship between you and the other person? So the Ajna Chakra helps you to understand. As you practice understanding, you're practicing love. As you have Alma, and Namaste, as you have love, Kavita, Abba Namaste, as you have love, right? You're able to harmonize the energies between you and the other person. So that goes to the heart chakra. So as the heart is big, as the heart is developed, it radiates coherent, harmonizing, loving energies. Have you ever been in the presence of somebody that you simply cannot argue with, you cannot fight with, you can't have a disagreement with because they love you so much and you love them so much? So it literally binds the two of you into this beautiful web of harmony. But if there's no love, what do you have? Friction. With enough friction, you have heat. And with enough heat, you have breaking down of the system, right? So love is the ultimate lubricant in your relationship between you and another person. Doesn't matter if it's your intimate partner, a coworker, your boss, your employees, does not matter. Love is the ultimate lubricant. The thing is, the people who are closest to us who we live with, who we live our days with, we have the most friction with because we are with them the most often, right? So it's even more important to have love, sweetness, joy, tenderness, softness with them, to have lubrication. This also is with our children. Why is it that we have a tendency to love our children unconditionally, but we don't have that same energy to love our partners unconditionally? We have to consistently and persistently have love with our children. We have to keep the heart open with our children. We don't think we have to do the same thing with other people in our lives that are close to us. We have to do it with everybody if we want to have harmony. If you don't want to have harmony with other people, don't worry about the love aspect. Throw it by the wayside, whatever, right? But if you want that WD-40, if you want the smooth, Denise, Atma Namaste, if you want that smooth, lubricating energy, you have to have love. Angela, Atma Namaste. So again, I'm going to read the sutra to you guys, for those of you who jumped on a minute ago. This is from the Golden Lotus Sutra series by Grandmaster Chogo Kokusui. This particular one is called Beyond the Mind, which is relative to our spiritual practices. And the quote that I'm pulling from today, or the sutra that I'm pulling from today, is, what is important is to understand, not to agree or disagree. Asana Chakra, understanding. As you practice understanding, you have a greater appreciation, love, and respect for that person, which activates your heart, which harmonizes the conflicting energies within you and the other person. But understanding is super, super important. It's not about agreeing. It's not about being in agreement with the other person for the sake of being in agreement. It's like, we want to understand why we agree with them or why we don't agree with them. We want to understand and penetrate the situation deeply. So for instance, right? We're in the United States. Most of the viewers here are in the United States. So somebody says, okay, well, I appreciate Donald Trump as our president, right? Somebody would say, okay, well, I completely disagree with you. So what? Who cares? Do you have understanding as to why that person has that viewpoint? Also, do you have the understanding as to why you have that viewpoint? Or are you basing it simply on your emotional body as to how you feel? Because yes, feelings are guiding systems to go back to the higher soul, but an even better way is activating your higher mental faculty, your Ajna chakra, to understand a situation clearly. We cannot, let me rephrase it. If you want to live a chaotic, drama-filled lifestyle, then live your life based on how you feel. You guys hear that? If you want to live a life of chaos and a life of drama, live your life based on how you feel, versus following the direction of the higher will. Because when this is in charge, this controls and regulates the energy of the lower chakras, the lower energy centers. That's why having a spiritual practice is so important. That's why praying to God on a regular basis is so important. That's why connecting up is so important, because it gives you control and regulation of the lower vehicles. It's kind of like your higher self is the parent and your lower self are the children, the chakras. If you just let children run the show, what kind of life would you have? If you let children run the household, what kind of household would you have? It'd be pretty chaotic, right? The same thing. We want the higher soul, the parent, if you will, to run the show. So again, if you want harmony, understand where somebody is coming from. It's super easy to sweep it under the rug when somebody makes a statement that you don't agree with, right? You're a Christian and the other person is Muslim. You're Muslim, the other person is Jewish. You're a Republican, the other person is a Democrat. The one person's liberal, the other person's conservative. So as soon as we have these contrasting energies, right, we immediately throw out the other person's viewpoint. We throw out their opinion. We disregard where they're coming from. That is super duper duper easy to do. I'm this, you're that, therefore your viewpoint is disregarded completely, right? I invalidate you as a human being because of one or two or three different viewpoints that you have, right? Versus, how can I understand that person better? How can I understand why they think the way they think, talk the way they talk, and live and behave the way that they live and behave? That requires way more skill. That requires a developed human being to do that, right? But isn't it super, super funny that we just disregard somebody because they have a certain viewpoint that we don't agree with? And isn't it also funny that if a person has a similar viewpoint to us, we become friends with them, right? So if you had a choice, would you prefer to be friends with somebody who agrees with your viewpoints only because, or would you rather be friends with someone who disagrees with you but has understanding of who and what you are and then have understanding as to why they do what they do? Which would you prefer? A person who has understanding or a person who just agrees with you out of emotionality? I myself would prefer to be in disagreement with somebody, but at least I know why they think what they think and how they understand something. That's just me. That might not be you, right? So we have a tendency to spend time with people who agree with us, and we have a tendency to avoid people who disagree with us. Does that make sense? So Ellie says, someone who disagrees but understands, that's how we grow. Correct. All kinds of friends. Yes. There's a term called echo chamber that got very, very popular the past 3 or 4 years, which deals with when you surround yourself with people who think the way you think, talk the way that you talk, and feel and experience the life the way that you do. We live in an echo chamber, right? So everything that we say is magnified. So all of our how do I put this? We're never tested with our viewpoints in an echo chamber because we only allow people into our chamber who share similar everything. What kind of life is that? What kind of development is that? Everyone that is in your proximity agrees with you, and anyone who disagrees with you, you completely push them out, right? Super weird. Why would you want that kind of relationship? In the corporate world, that's called being a yes man or a yes woman. So the boss has a viewpoint, and rather than that viewpoint being challenged and tested and questioned, everyone around that boss says, yes, sir, no, sir. Yes, sir, absolutely. Yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, right? Everything is in agreement. What kind of life is that? Living in a bubble, correct. So Adriana says another way of looking at it is living in a bubble. So echo chamber, living in a bubble, yes men, yes women, and that's not a way to live. So understanding where somebody is coming from is far more valuable than whether they agree with you or disagree with you. Robotic people. Yeah. And it's actually interesting because in my early days of pranic healing, a lot of the people that I spent my time with were people that disagreed with me. Right? They disagree with me. They're like, what are you talking about? You're waving your hands in the air and you're thinking somebody's going to get better by doing that? That's crazy. And I'm like, am I crazy? Or are they crazy? Why do they have that viewpoint? Right? What did that do? It made me question what I was doing. And through the process of questioning what I was doing, what did that develop? Understanding. Hello? Right? It gave me understanding. It made me go, well, from their viewpoint, with their lack of training, lack of skill, and lack of awareness in what I do, it would make sense for them to say what they're saying. Right? But okay, am I practicing self-delusion in my own life? Am I really helping somebody by waving my hands in the air? How can I validate that? How can I maybe have a double-blind study in my own world with this practice to validate or invalidate whether it works or not? And obviously doing it for 16 years, I have enough, James, I'm going to say, I have enough case studies, I have enough positive feedback to validate whether this is true or not, whether these techniques are universal or not, whether it's placebo in my head or not, right? So no more questions about it. I validated for myself, but if and when I come across a person who is a disbeliever, right, I'm completely fine with that. I don't try to change them. I don't try to manipulate them. I don't try to make them wrong and me right. What do? I ask questions to understand where they're coming from. I'll give you a funny story. It happened this past weekend. I'm not going to name any names. This person's probably not going to be on anyways. I'm not too worried about it. So this person made a statement, an absolute statement, that said, people cannot change. You guys hear what I just said? This person made the statement that people cannot change. You're born a certain way, you live that way, you die that way, right? You can't change. And I thought that was one of the most crazy things I had heard in a long time. But what did I do? Did I try to argue? Did I try to make him wrong and make myself right? Absolutely not. What did I kick into gear? My coaching abilities, my ability to ask questions, my ability to acknowledge and validate, my ability to have active listening, right? So as I started asking questions, started seeking to understand, didn't make him wrong, didn't attack his ego and get him defensive, what happened at the end of that conversation within 10 minutes? Within 10 minutes, he realized his statement that people cannot change is inaccurate. And he actually ended the statement with 100% of people can change. 100% of people can improve and become better. Yeah, Adrian says, I saw a lot of people change. So he was making his statement, one, based on emotion, two, based on lack of clarity, because he didn't quite understand what change meant. He didn't understand, Josiah, I'm going to say, he didn't understand what change meant. He didn't understand what transformation meant. He didn't understand the process of going from where you are to where you want to be, even though he had demonstrated it in his own life. So he went from 90 to 95% of the world's population cannot change to literally the exact opposite statement that 100% of people can change. And he had greater awareness and understanding as to, well, what makes somebody change? What makes somebody change? And what he realized was, on one level of truth, willpower. You have to have the will to change. You have to have the will to change, the will to become a better person, the will to do the right thing, the will to not do the wrong thing, right? Willpower. What's up, love from a brother, another mother? Does that make sense? Super, super important. So do you see how one sutra in this teeny tiny little bitty baby book can lead to an entire, what? Hour-long stream. One sutra. And there's many, many levels of truth even still. One of my mentors and I took one of the other Golden Lotus Sutra books called the Achieve the Impossible, and we spent 2 or 3 weeks on it. One teeny tiny little bitty baby book. Just to practice a greater level of understanding. Now, does it mean you've mastered something just by understanding it? No, because you have to practice it. Then when you practice something, you become masterful of it. You should write a book. Ellie, you're like the 10th person in my life that says I should write a book. Yes. I have not made it a priority. I have the outline in my noggin. of what we're going to write the book on. And you know, it's really cool. Two of the masters in pranic healing have a publishing company. And so they said, whenever there's a pranic healer who's ready, willing, and able to write their book, we will help publish it and promote it. So it's like a built-in, like, bam, taken care of, right? Hard copy and Kindle version. It's pretty cool. Super, super grateful. So just one more kick in the butt to make it happen, which would be willpower. So to finish off today's stream, I'm going to read it one last time of what sutra we covered in today's stream. What is important? My book smells like Lang Lang, the essential oil. It's nice. I get all emotionally blissed out reading the book because it's blessed. What is important is to understand, not to agree or disagree. Not to agree or disagree. Because who cares? Usually when we agree or disagree, it's coming from our lower emotions. Yeah, Susan loves her Lang Lang for sure. One of my favorites. Lang Lang is a essential oil. It's a flower, but they turn it into essential oil that is used for emotional healing and relationship intimacy. I have the book next to me, and it's kind of like wafting the oil into my face, and the oil was blessed, was cleansed, consecrated, and programmed, and it got onto my book because it was in my bag, and the oil's in my bag, and so I'm kind of like blissing out a little bit as I'm talking to you guys. So agreeing or disagreeing is more emotional. It's not using the higher mental faculties as to why you do or don't do something. Because how many of us, when we sense somebody pushing on us to change, to transform, to have a different viewpoint than we currently have, how many of us resist that? How many of us dig our heels in even deeper to prove to the other person that they don't know what they're talking about and we know what we're talking about? That's an example of agreeing or disagreeing versus seeking to understand. There's a term in psychology that deals with persuasion. It was written about many, many years ago in a book. What was it? The Persuasion Factor? I forget the name of the book. It's been like almost 20 years since I've read it. But one of the main principles of persuading people is called the principle of commitment and consistency. Commitment and consistency. So if you want to persuade somebody, you simply have them continue to show up in the way that they've been showing up. That's why it's so hard to get people to change. So for instance, if your identity is that of a conservative, right? You're a political conservative. Your thoughts, your words, and your actions will be congruent and consistent with that viewpoint, right? So if you want to persuade somebody, you just attach that identity and then say, a conservative would do this. And then you insert what you want them to do, right? A conservative would do this. So you could do the same thing with, if you want something from somebody and they have an identity that they are a kind, generous person. Jillian, namaste, you change your profile picture. Does that make sense? You would say to them, hey, can you help me out with this? Because I know you're a kind, generous person, and they identify as being a kind, generous person. They're not basing it on an understanding. They're basing it on an emotional program that they are identified with. So that's a way to manipulate somebody for your own means and ends. Make sense? And I've had people do that to me over the years of the work that I do as an energy healer, meditation teacher, and spiritual practitioner. So they will use that of like, they'll ask something from me, and they'll go, well, you're an energy healer, or you care about other people, don't you? And if I'm caught in the program of being an energy healer, being a person of goodwill and the will to do good, right? I'm going to go, yeah, I guess I am. I'm following the rule of commitment and consistency. I'm being congruent with my viewpoint. That's why it's so difficult for people to change, because they have ingrained viewpoints on who and what they are. But if you practice understanding, right, and you're flexible in your viewpoint, you're adaptable in your viewpoint, you can go, well, actually, in this particular situation, that doesn't apply for this, and this reasons. The better choice is to do this, and this. That's the higher level of truth. Does that make sense? So that's an amazing book that many, 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 many marketers that I know online, offline, impersonally, and personally use to get people to do what they want them to do. Not namaste. So that principle is called the principle of commitment and consistency. So it's kind of like, if somebody says they're Catholic and their local church calls them up for a donation, and they say, oh, you're a practicing Catholic, and in Catholicism we're taught about generosity and we're taught about tithing. So how much would you like to give this month? Well, if the person's practicing commitment and consistency, they have to donate in order to be in alignment with that commitment and consistency, also known as congruency. If not, what is it? They're being incongruent. And that is one of the most negative attributes that we practice within humans. So psychologists have determined that's one of the most negative attributes of somebody being incongruent. Saying one thing and doing something different. It's the same thing as lying, right? The person says this and then they do the opposite, right? That means the person is not trustworthy. And if somebody's not trustworthy, we don't want to spend any time with them, because we don't know when they're going to be a risk to our well-being and safety. Makes sense, right? We don't want to be around people that cannot keep their commitments. So that's why the persuasion principle of commitment and consistency is so very, very important, right? And then if we aren't practicing congruency, if we aren't practicing commitment and consistency, we have cognitive dissonance, and a human being will do anything and everything to alleviate the emotional pain of cognitive dissonance. So we either start lying to ourselves or we change our behavior, right? So we either lie to ourselves and we make up all these excuses and rationalizations as to why we do or don't do something, or we change our behavior. Fascinating, right? Juanita, namaste. Good to have you on. I liked your pre-dance picture with your I guess your dance partner or one of your dance partners. Does that make sense? So it's fascinating. I know we kind of started with one sutra and then it kind of evolved into other things. But the goal is on these streams is always to add a tremendous amount of value to you guys. I always want you to walk away going, wow, I never thought of that. I never looked at it from that perspective. I never looked at it from that level of truth. And we want to practice practical spirituality. It's great to have these concepts, these ideals, these things to shoot for, but how do we apply it into our day-to-day lives? Because without practical application, doesn't mean anything. It's all, as I like to call it, mental masturbation. So what? You know a bunch of things, you don't live any of those things, who cares? Versus the person who takes one technique and masters it over a 10-year, 20-year period, that's impressive. Versus the person who knows 1,000 techniques but practices none of them. I'll take the guy who knows one technique, masters one technique, and transforms his life and transforms the lives of thousands of people. Some of you may be familiar with the breathing expert who has broken over 20 world records, Wim Hof. Wim Hof created a worldwide movement with 3 breathing techniques. There's more to the story, obviously, but simply put, he took 3 breathing techniques and broke 20 world records with those 3 breathing techniques, and created a worldwide movement that opened up the doorway for many, many people to get involved in personal development, spiritual development, meditation, and different yogic practices, because he chose to become masterful of a few techniques instead of learning about thousands of techniques and practicing none of them. Does that make sense? I hope that helps. So that's why we like to jump on these streams and go, what's the practical? So from today's stream, the practical is you want to have more harmonious relationships with those around you, rather than approaching the interaction with I agree with you or I disagree with you. Approach it from the perspective of how can I understand why that person thinks, speaks, and does what they do. I want to understand them. I want to sit on the same side of the table with them to understand them. And it's interesting because have you ever noticed there's a tendency that when someone's talking and sharing, in your mind, you're like thinking of other things, or you're like, I can't wait for them to finish so I can say what I have to say, so I can add value, so I can be validated, so I can be seen as intelligent, so I can be seen as compassionate, so I can be seen as whatever, versus the other viewpoint, the person sharing, and you're trying to understand them. So all the attention is taken off of you and placed on the other person. That's what coaching is. That's what active listening is. That's what acknowledging and validating is. It's not about you. It's about, why does that person say what they're saying? Versus I have this little inner dialogue of like, God, this is so boring. When is this person going to stop talking? When is it blah, 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 blah. Then you're completely missing the interaction between you and the other person and not creating harmony. Ellie says, one can never be bored listening to Christian Long. That's funny. Does that make sense though? So it's like, to me, that seems so much more rewarding because look, this is a spoiler alert for everyone listening right now. You already know your thoughts, your viewpoints, your beliefs about the world. Hello? You already know, right? True or not true? But do you know the thoughts, the viewpoints, and the beliefs of others around you? And doesn't it make you feel good when someone truly listens to you and acknowledges where you're at? I know people that acknowledge where I'm at and don't agree with me at all, but it makes me feel good. Like I intuitively know that person doesn't agree with me, but that person was seeking to understand me. That person was seeking to build a bridge of communication with me. That person was meeting me where I was at versus judging me, criticizing me, pigeonholing me, prejudging me, etc., etc., etc. So the point is, becoming a developed person is not easy. Becoming a developed person takes light, love, and power. Becoming a developed person is a moment by moment by moment experience. It's easy to judge. It's easy to have preconceived ideas. It's easy to be lazy in our listening, in our thinking, in our speech, in our actions. It's easy to do all of those things. It's not easy to become a great person. It's not easy to become a great soul. As Master Ko would say, you do not become a saint by accident, right? Some of us have the goal of becoming a saint in this lifetime. I know a few people, their goal literally is to become a saint, not for pride, not for ego, but to be a greater instrument of goodwill and the will to do good. They are inspired to transform the lives of other people, right? I'll leave you with this last story because the energy is flowing. So I'm like, all right, well, what else? I'll leave you with this last story. So this was brought up recently at one of the retreats that there's something in the world of spirituality within the energy anatomy called the golden body. So basically the golden body is a high level of development, which means the etheric body of somebody right? You have our physical body. The next body is called the etheric body, which is the blueprint for the physical body. So when we reach a certain level of purification and a certain level of development, we develop what is known as the etheric golden body. So you'll see certain saints from different traditions, statues of them or paintings of them as gold. It's a representation of their level of development. They have developed the golden body. So many, many years ago, within pranic healing, there were 5 people who were dedicated to developing the golden body. They were dedicated to developing the golden body. They said, we want to develop the golden body because that would be super, super cool to develop the golden body. So every single week, they would show up at the center and they would do their advanced meditation practices with one another. They would scan, they would clairvoyantly look, and then week after week after week after week, they would do the practices in the hopes, in the attempt, in the aspiration of achieving the golden body. After 8 months of weekly practice, every single one of them not only dropped out of that practice of the weekly developing the golden body, but they dropped out of their spiritual practices entirely. Bye, Susan. Love you. Does that make sense? They dropped out. Why? So one of the masters was examining what was going on, right? Because what was the goal? The goal was to develop the golden body. But the question is why? Why were they developing the golden body? Was it because of pride? Or was it to be a greater instrument of goodwill and the will to do good, to serve more people? So he found out that while they were developing very strong energy bodies, very big energized chakras and aura, they weren't character building. They weren't doing the things to become a better person. So they were developing all of this energy, but they weren't working on becoming better people. They only want to develop the golden body to show others, look, I did it. I accomplished my target of developing the golden body. But you know, the interesting thing I didn't come to this realization myself. This was brought to my realization from somebody else, that the great, great teachers are the ones who give you the golden body for the purpose of serving others. So if you're serving others through healing, through teaching, through mentorship, through feeding programs, through tutoring programs, through any and all means of helping humanity, right? They will give you a golden body. They will provide you with the energies and protection necessary to transform the lives of other people. Because developing a golden body just out of pure will and out of gratification of the ego, it's temporary. It'll disappear overnight. But if your goal is to serve humanity, they will gradually upgrade you so you have the energy, the attributes, the support, the protection necessary to transform humanity. Took me a while to figure that out. I didn't figure it out. I had a certain viewpoint that was inaccurate, and then through the process of awareness, coaching, healing, I had my own revelation around it. And I'm very, very grateful for it. So if you want to develop a golden body, don't go at it through, I want to develop the golden body. Go at it from, I want to be a greater instrument of goodwill and the will to do good, to uplift humanity. And the great ones will provide you the energies to transform. Make sense? We really covered the gambit for today's live stream. It's probably because it's not late. It's probably in the middle of the day, so there's more energy, not so in the shutting down phase, but more in the amping up phase. So That being said, for those of you who I can serve, who I can help, who I can assist to transform your life, feel free, ChristianRLong.com. That's my website. Go there. Sign up for a distant pranic healing session or coaching. I do 30 minutes of coaching to get clarity and understanding, which is super important. And then 30 minutes of healing to transform your energy so you can move your life forward to be a greater instrument of goodwill and the will to do good, however that looks for you and your own individual dharma. You're welcome, Ellie. You're welcome, Josiah. My pleasure. God and teacher's blessings be with you. Hey, Juliana snuck on. You little sneak. I think I saw your face actually earlier. Always good to have you on. So, that being said, I hope you guys have a beautiful day, beautiful week, beautiful life. I'll touch base with you probably sometime tomorrow. I feel like there's something else I'm supposed to jump on and do. We have our newsletter tomorrow. So for those of you who are subscribed to the weekly newsletter, you'll get that tomorrow night. For those of you who are not subscribed to the weekly newsletter, please go to the ChristianRLong.com website. Yuvi, namaste. You're late to the party, girl. Go to the website, sign up for the newsletter, put your name and your email, and then every Wednesday you get my blood, my sweat, and my prana in every single newsletter, usually 2.5 to 3 hours to write it. It's a quote from my teacher, Grandmaster Chogo Kokusui, and then breaking that quote down to apply it into your life. So Fernando says, coaching and framing framing, right? Is that what you said? Coaching and framing super important. Absolutely. Fernando is a very good coach and a very good healer, so he knows what time it is. Late for the party, I guess. Namaste. Atta girl. So thank you guys very, very much for sharing your time, your energy, your comment with the group, your questions, because whatever question you ask, I'm almost 100% sure other people were having that same question in their noggins and they didn't think to or didn't want to write it out. So when we can answer a question, everyone benefits. So the learning curve accelerates for all of us, which is super, super important. And that's how we have transformation. So that being said, thank you guys very, very much. Have a beautiful week, beautiful life. I will talk to you soon. This is Christian Long, Life Enhancement Consultant, Atma. Namaste. Bye-bye.